What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Dragonflight video. Let's talk about the Storm build. This is the very first build that we're going to do in our little mini-series on the 4 different builds for Enhancement Shaman, and we're going to kind of pit them against each other. Remember the criteria that I have for measuring these builds. We're going to talk about damage. We're going to talk about our rotation, execution, and difficulty. How easy is it to produce damage from this build? We're going to talk about Maelstrom Weapon Stack Generation. We're going to talk about the tier set bonus and how it interacts with the tier set bonus. Those are all really important things in all of these builds to know for sure if they're going to be good, if they're actually going to be able to produce damage and help us to do the most we can in a key environment. Remember, all these builds that I'm doing are for Mythic Plus right now. This is what it's for. It's primarily talking about AoE damage, but when we're measuring when we're actually talking about the damage portion of this video, it is going to include a single target metric because there are boss fights in dungeons, of course, right? So we're not entirely getting away from single target, but this is primarily focused on Mythic Plus. Okay, so let's start out by talking about how the Storm build works and the talents that are here. I'm going to go over this quickly because some of you probably already know. You can just skip ahead to the next section if you don't want to hear about this. Okay, so how does the Storm build work? First of all, it is primarily focused around Storm Strike, right? It's all about Storm Strike. You want to press Storm Strike as much as you possibly can because of deeply rooted elements. You're hoping to try and proc DRE, which will proc Ascendance. It'll do a big explosion of damage, and it'll turn your Storm Strike into Wind Strike, which is really good. And then as you go down here, you get down to Thorms, which says, while your Ascendance is active, your Wind Strikes will throw lightning at the enemy, maybe Chain Lightning or Lightning Bolt, depending on which spender you've used last. So the idea is press Storm Strike as much as you possibly can so that you trigger deeply rooted elements so that you're throwing lightning while you're while you're doing the Wind Strikes, basically, which is really, really cool. It looks amazing when you do it. That's the whole crux of the build. So everything else in this build is designed to reset the cooldown of Storm Strike. How do we do that? With Legacy of the Frost Witch, right? Consuming 10 stacks of Maelstrom Weapon resets the cooldown on Storm Strike and increases your physical damage, which is great, but we really don't even care about that. All we care about in this build is generating Maelstrom Weapon stacks as quickly as we can so that we can reset Storm Strike so we can press Storm Strike again. So that when we press it, it might proc DRE. That's the whole build in a nutshell, okay? So that's the idea. The rotation is actually very, very easy. You simply, in AoE in particular, you're looking at Storm Strike, Crash Lightning, and Chain Lightning as your main sort of go-to buttons, right? So I'm going to Storm Strike here. Oh, I got Storm Strike again. Crash Lightning. I reset Storm Strike. I'm going to press it again. Okay. Now I have a Chain Lightning. I'm going to press it. It didn't reset Storm Strike yet because we have to get to 10 stacks. So Storm Strike, Storm Strike, Storm Strike, Chain Lightning, reset Storm Strike. Press it again. Crash Lightning. Okay. I'm going to do a Storm Strike, Crash Lightning, Storm Strike, and a Chain Lightning, and reset Storm Strike again. Storm Strike, right? This is the whole build. Oh, look, we got a proc on DRE. Imagine that. That's exactly what you're looking for. And then you press your Wind Strike, and it channels lightning into the enemies. You see that? So that's how the build works. That's how the build works, right in a nutshell. It's very, very simple. I'm going to get to that part in a second. We're going to look at the damage now. So I just wanted to say that that's how the build kind of functions. You want to be pressing Storm Strike as much as possible to trigger DRE. Legacy helps you do that. Okay, that's what you're doing. Now, let's talk about the damage. How much damage does this sucker actually do? Let's look at an Oldemon plus 20 that I did. You can see the overall damage is pretty insane. This is the most I've ever done in a dungeon to date on any build. 141k overall. That's insane. Let's look at the actual breakdown of how that looks. So we've got Chain Lightning being our highest damage, Crash Lightning. These are our nature spells. That's why it's called the Storm build, right? And then you have physical spells. Wind Fury, the Spirit Wolves are doing physical damage. Sundering is physical. Storm Strike is physical. So we're mixing nature damage and physical damage into one. That's what this build does, okay? So that's the primary function of the build in terms of its damage. How does it look for AoE damage? I'm going to start giving a rating now. So this is the first rating we're going to get. The first one is going to be the AoE rating, and I'm going to give it 5 out of 5, okay? This whole damage section is worth 10 points, okay? So for AoE damage, it's 5 out of 5 for sure, because our chain lightning, crash lightning are doing insane damage. We had a crash lightning hit for 100k here, chain lightning hit for 250k, had a sundering hit for 200k. These things are absolutely mental. We get our Spirit Wolves with Alpha Wolf down here. This makes our Spirit Wolves do extra AoE damage whenever we cast crash lightning or chain lightning. So it's basically all the time. It's going to be up all the time. And then whenever we press Doom Winds with Sundering, right, our 2 cooldowns here, we press Doom Winds into Sundering, it does a lot of AoE damage. So very, very strong on the AoE front. It is very good. Single target damage, I'm only giving it 3 out of 5. Now, I kind of wanted to give it 4 out of 5, but realistically, it only should get 3 out of 5. Let me show you some footage really quickly on the AoE damage. Let's start here. This is the opening of the build. So we're going to run in. This is a big AoE pack. Watch my damage here. We get all of our cooldowns rolling. Doom Winds into Sundering. I do get a Cap Totem out. The mobs aren't really grouped up super well here yet, so I didn't get a ton of damage out off the bat. But then we're spiking here, 300k, 350k. We do get a deeply rooted proc right here, 360k, 370, and we get almost up to 400k there. So I've had other pulls into Freehold, for example, where I did over 500k. This isn't the best example. I just wanted to show you the AoE damage potential. You can get up to like 500k AoE damage with this thing. It's not an issue whatsoever. Let's go to 8, 14, 15. Let's talk about the single target damage, because this is a concern for this build, okay?
I'm gonna win this area.
We're fighting a single target boss here, and so there's no AoE whatsoever. The damage is okay. Off the bat, the damage is pretty good. This is where you really have to be managing your Legacy of the Frostwitch procs and your Stormbringer procs. Let me just move this down here, sorry. You really have to be managing your Legacy of the Frostwitch procs and your Stormkeeper, or Stormbringer procs. Sorry, not Stormkeeper, Stormbringer. Those are resetting the cooldown on Stormstrike. Those are helping to fuel your single target rotation, and it keeps the build flowing, and it keeps you doing damage. If you mess up and cast a Spender while you have Stormstrike off cooldown, then you just wasted an entire Legacy proc, right? You need to use Stormstrike first, get it on cooldown, then use your Spender to get it off cooldown again, then you can press Stormstrike again. It's that cycle. So if you kind of mess up that cycle, your single target damage will not look particularly good. And you can see even here, our damage is okay. By the end of this fight, we end up sort of catching up with everybody else because they've used their cooldowns and they're kind of dropping down. Again, we don't really have any cooldowns to worry about whatsoever. That's the best part about this build. The execution of it is not that difficult because the cooldowns just aren't really there, which is really nice. It's not just a huge, not really a big problem at all. Other builds have very complicated cooldowns that you have to manage, not with the Storm build. So you can see the single target damage here, not the best. You really have to manage that Legacy, and you have to hopefully get lucky with a proc, which I got at the very end of this fight, unfortunately. I got a DRE proc right at the very end, so that's what you don't want to happen. But the single target damage, I'm only going to give 3 out of 5 because it does struggle a little bit in some of those fights. You're going to struggle a little bit. But generally speaking, overall, the damage is very strong, 8 out of 10 for the damage. Okay, let's move on to the rotation, execution, difficulty part of the build, right? We're going to talk about is the build easy to execute? How, does that matter? We're going to talk about all that right now. So, as you saw me do the rotation, it's very simple. The rotation is not complicated at all. It's Stormstrike, Crash Lightning, and Chain Lightning. Those are the 3 main buttons, right here. This is almost your entire rotation. On top of that, you're going to just add in your extra little cooldowns. Like I said, there aren't any real cooldowns to have to think about. You have Doom Winds and Sundering. What I mean is, by not having to think about them, is you just press them on cooldown. Don't wait for anything. You don't have to set up any flame shocks. You don't have to do anything special. You just get your dogs out, and then you press your buttons. Doom Winds, Sundering, and go. There's my Chain Lightning. I'm going to press Stormstrike, Crash Lightning, Chain Lightning again. We're doing crazy damage here, right? Really, really good damage. My dogs are back. I'm going to press them again. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not worried about it. There's no, mental tax here at all. I'm just pressing my buttons in the correct rotation that I want to be pressing them, trying to get resets on Stormstrike. That's all you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about a Primordial Wave window, setting up my Flame Shocks, making sure I get the best execution, the best detonation possible for my Primordial Wave window. You don't have to worry about that at all. You just press Doom Winds and you press Sundering when they come off cooldown, and you press your Wolves when they come off cooldown. Okay, I got a proc right here. I'm going to press Sundering right now. I'm just going to keep going with it. Boom. We're just going. Make sure I press Sundering, keep it going. My wolves are back, I'm gonna press them. That's how it works, guys. So I want to really emphasize that there's no issue that way in terms of cooldowns. The other builds all have Primordial Wave in them, and some of them have Hailstorm and Fire Nova, and you have to worry about making sure you press Frost Shock or Fire Nova, making sure you get your Primordial Wave out there, spread your Flame Shocks, get the Lightning Bolt detonation first. There's some complication there that does not exist with this build, whatsoever. So it has a really good edge above the other builds, in my opinion, in terms of the ease of execution, the ease of your rotation. There's nothing complicated about this rotation. It's just 3 buttons, and then you're adding in the cooldowns on top of that whenever they come up. Okay, so very, very simple. That's what I love about this build. And what I think is really good about this build is it allows you to use your other utility. Things like Cap Totem, things like your Cleanse Totem, things like knocking enemies up with Thunder Shock from your Thunderstorm. It is so easy for me mentally to be able to use all of these other skills that I have because my rotation is not complicated. I'm not worrying about the extra procs on my Lava Lash that I got. I'm not worrying about my Primordial Wave window. I'm not worried about pressing Frost Shock after every single spender. I just do my rotation, I summon my wolves, and I use my cooldowns when they come up. That really frees my mind up to be able to use my other utility, like Windrush Totem. Maybe I have to cleanse somebody, depending on what week it is for the Mythic Plus affix. Maybe I have an Afflicted mob that I have to use. Maybe I want to slow the enemies down. Maybe I'm getting some enemies that need to be slowed, and I can use Earthbind Totem, right? I can get all that. I can use my Windrush, Earthbind. I can use my Cap Totem. I have my Thunder Shock. I can knock enemies up. There's all these extra things that I can do because the rotation is not very complicated. I want to emphasize this because it's really important to understand how to contribute to your team in a Mythic Plus environment. If I can be doing 200k damage on every single pack and be stunning mobs and be knocking up enemies and be kicking on cooldown with my Wind Surge, like look how many times I kicked in this dungeon. Hopefully this number is pretty high. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here. But interrupts, you can see I did 20 interrupts in this dungeon. You know why? Because the rotation is so simple. The rotation is so simple. That's why. I don't know if they have... whatever. I just want to focus on that. So, very important statistic to talk about how this build is so easy to execute. It allows me to do other things for my team, okay? The only things you really have to watch for is your legacy resets. That's all you're kind of worried about with this build. If you can manage the legacy resets properly, this build is amazing, okay? Let's move on to Maelstrom Weapon Stack Generation. I want to show you something really awesome on this build. So, over here, you can see the Maelstrom Weapon Stack Generation. I can't even see the number. I've been trying to figure out how to make this number bigger, and I can't figure it out for the life of me. Somebody tell me in the comments down below how to make this number bigger, like for me to be able to see it all. But I believe that this is 52,000 Maelstrom Weapon Stacks that I generated. It seems a little bit crazy, and it might not be 52,000. It's probably just more like 5,200 and something that I can't see. Let's just say that that's what it is for now. This is the Storm build. We can see the other builds here. I did a different build in this next dungeon, the Neltharian's Lair. I believe this was the Elementalist build, okay? The Elementalist build for me only generated about 2,400 Maelstrom Weapon Stacks. The next Fire build, this was the Pure Fire build, only generated around 2,000 and something Maelstrom Weapon Stacks. And then I did the Flame Strike build at the very end. This generated 4,300 Maelstrom Weapon Stacks, okay? So the Storm build generated 5,200. 52 something something. It generated the most out of all the builds, and that's because of just the way that it functions. Pressing Storm Strike has a very, very high chance to generate it. I take Ice Strike with Swirling Maelstrom. This guarantees that I get a Maelstrom Weapon Stack generated off of Ice Strike. This is so important on single target fights in a dungeon. When you're low on resources, when you're in AoE and you press Crash Lightning, it'll generate 10 Maelstrom Weapon Stacks basically every single time, no matter what. Sundering on a big AoE pack, it'll generate full Maelstrom Weapon Stacks for you, okay? But on a single target fight, this really helps you a lot. The Ice Strike plus Swirling Maelstrom will help you to generate those extra Maelstrom Weapon Stacks. But the bottom line is, this build is great for generating Maelstrom Weapon Stacks. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I forgot to give a, I forgot to say the rotation score. It was 5 out of 5. It probably popped up on the screen there. That's my bad. But I'm also going to give 5 out of 5 for the Maelstrom Weapon Stack Generation. This build is insane. It generates the most Maelstrom Weapon Stacks of any build. It helps to cool down your Feral Spirits because of Witch Doctor's Ancestry. It cools them down so fast which allows you to have your dogs up all the time, basically, which gives you an extra 30% physical damage bonus. And the dogs generate Maelstrom weapon stacks on their own when they're up, right? So it keeps the flow of the build going, and especially in single target scenarios, this little combo up here really saves your butt because it allows you to generate that extra Maelstrom weapon stack from Ice Strike, which just keeps the flow of the build going. So I really, really like how much this thing generates, okay? The final category is the tier set bonus. How does this build interact with the tier set bonus? Is it good? And the bottom line is, yes, it's very, very good. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 for this as well. Here's why. Whenever you press Sundering, you're going to get 24% mastery. What was our top damage over in the dungeon? Oh, look, it's stuff that benefits from mastery. Chain Lightning and Crash Lightning are nature spells. So they're getting 24% more damage after you press Sundering, and it shows. They're doing tons of damage here, okay? That's really, really good. Now, what's next? After you press Sundering, you increase your physical and fire damage dealt by 20%. Our physical damage is also showing up here on the charts. Wind Fury is physical. All of the damage that our dogs did was physical, including Spirit Bomb right there. So our Spirit Wolf, oh yeah, it's all here. Wind Fury, Spirit Wolves, Sundering, and Storm Strike. They're all physical, guys. They're all physical. Look at this. This is 20% of our damage plus another 11. That's 31% of our damage. Almost 32% of our damage is right here. I'm not even including the melees down here and the wind strikes. It's probably more like 35% of our damage was physical. So you can see 45% of our damage is like nature, and then another 35% is physical. So it's really good that the tier set bonus gives us that physical damage amp. It's really, really good. So again, 20% more physical damage, very, very good. And then finally, the Chain Lightning damage that comes through is really good because it's obviously just lots of extra damage. But also, because we're running Thorum's Invocation, every time we press that Chain Lightning, not to mention, we're buffing the Chain Lightning damage right away because of Thorum's, 20% more Chain Lightning damage, stacking with the tier set bonus. But on top of that, whenever we press Chain Lightning, there's a chance that it will just immediately refund all of the Maelstrom weapon stacks that were spent. So you can go from like, 5 all the way to 10, and then it can refresh it again. You can get refunded for all that. Sorry, that has to, static accumulation is what does that. I'm so sorry. 20% chance for the stuff to be refunded. So again, it's just really, really good. This builds a lot of Maelstrom weapon stacks, and then when you consume those Chain Lightnings, I know that they're going to give a refund all on their own, but there's also a chance that they might just fully refund from Thorum's Invocation. Okay, so I think the synergy with the tier set bonus is top tier. That's why it gets 5 out of 5. So the entire score for Enhancement Shaman, this Storm build for Enhancement Shaman, is going to be 23 out of 25. It only loses 2 points on its single target damage because sometimes you're not getting the procs, and you can definitely lag behind other DPS that are doing really strong single target damage. So that is the full breakdown for the Enhancement Shaman, the Storm build for Enhancement Shaman. I keep saying it is the Storm build. Once again, this is the highest performing build for me overall. Just a couple of final thoughts. This thing is absolutely insane. I think that it does completely insane AoE damage. Again, the single target damage is the struggle, but the rotation on this build, it's so simple. The simplicity of the rotation is so great. You only have these 3 different abilities to worry about. And that is amazing. That really helps. It helps you to be able to just use your utility in the rest of your kit, right? You can use your Cap Totem. You can use your Knock-Up. You can use your Poison Cleanse. You can use AG. There's just so much. Your mind is not worried with trying to balance multiple different cooldowns at the same time. You just send it. You just full send everything, and it's good to go. So I love the damage. I love the rotation. The Maelstrom weapon stack generation is really solid, and it synergizes very, very well with our tier set bonus. I think, guys, this is probably one of the best builds in my opinion, and it's going to get a 23 out of 25. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm going to show you the tier list at the very end of all the 4 videos, and I will compare the different builds, and we'll see which one ends up being the best. Right now, the Storm build is looking pretty great at 23 out of 25 in terms of my little marking scheme that I've got going here, okay? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What has your experience been like with the Storm build? Do you think I'm ranking it too high? I would love to hear from all of you. Give me your constructive criticism in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you down there. Thank you guys so much again for watching. I love you all. I will see you in the next video.